Now guys, just before we start this video, I just wanted to quickly remind you to join our AFL Fantasy and AFL tipping comps. The codes are on screen right now. All you have to do with the tipping comp is download the ESPN Footy Tips app and join up to the league. And if you win either the AFL Fantasy League or the AFL tipping comp, you will win a $100 gift voucher to the AFL store. So make sure to click the links down below, join up, and let's have some fun. But for now, let's get into today's video. G'day guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the first episode of the review for 2025. Today we're going to be reviewing all the match simulations, breaking down as much as we can find, as the AFL haven't really broadcasted a lot of information regarding the match simulations other than the Indigenous All-Stars game. So I've tried to scope out the internet, trying to find as much information as you guys need to know. First of all, we start Saturday afternoon, February the 15th, Essendon up against Western Bulldogs, a Whitten Oval. In the end, not that the result really matters, but the Bombers did win by 19 points, 77 to the Bulldogs 58. Now, the Dogs had a good start to this game, but after a 5-goal to 1 second term from the Dons, Essendon were able to keep control for the remainder of the contest. Now, NGA Academy product Isaac Kako showed some impressive moments in his first outing with a classy goal and also laid quite a few tackles, so good forward pressure from him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing an opening round at this stage. Archie Perkins played a little bit of a forward role at times, and we saw a really good performance from a former top draftee in Elijah Sardis, playing as a straight midfielder. Now, granted, Parrish and Durham didn't play in this game, and a lot of the senior mids for the Bombers didn't play in the second half, but he still performed very well. He had 31 touches. It was a part of over 85% of CBAs for the Bombers throughout the game. He had the highest amount of centre bounce attendances for the Bombers, so a lot of people are saying that he's going to be a lock for round 0 for the Dons, so keep your eye out on him. But of course, we have to talk about the SSP hopeful in Tom Edwards. What a performance he showed, and what an audition. Now, Tom kicked 4 goals throughout the game, all in the second half, and was brilliant in contests as well. Took a couple of nice pack marks. So hopefully for Bombers fans out there, maybe he gets a go. And Tom Edwards, hopefully for his sake, he does get on an AFL list, because it was a great performance from him. And who knows, because I am starting to record this on Saturday of the 15th. Maybe he's already been signed to the Dons. Let's just hope so. Now, on the Bulldogs' point of view, not a lot was really gathered from them. A lot of the players that they expected to play in round 1 were out of this game. Players like Bontempelli, Liberatore weren't in. But there were a couple of good news stories for the Dogs. First of all, Ed Richards did take a little bit more of a starring role in the midfield, especially in the first half. Showed some good signs and kicked a nice goal. Great news for anyone who is looking at Riley Sanders in this preseason. He attended over 70% of CBAs throughout the game, which was the best for the Dogs. Another SSP hopeful in Braden Crosley was the main ruckman for the match sim for the Dogs, even though Tim English was playing. However, with English coming back from an abdominal injury that he's had over the summer, I'd take this with a grain of salt. And finally, there was a big collision in the second term involving Ed Richards and Mason Redman, but they both came off fine from that incident. And in great news for both sides, there was no injuries to speak of from this game. After that, we get to the Indigenous All-Stars game against Fremantle, and as most of us expected, the All-Stars were able to run over Fremantle in the end. The All-Stars 108, Fremantle 65. Now, the All-Stars started pretty well in this game, did really well on turnover, and caused Fremantle to play a pretty slow brand of football. Now, Freo tried to speed up the game in the second term, but with both teams being pretty rusty with the footy in their first competitive outing in the year, the All-Stars just were a lot more punishing on turnover. And after a 5-goal third term from the All-Stars, it did see Fremantle take the foot off the gas a little bit. And if I'm being honest, the All-Stars just were a class above in the end. So like I said, the All-Stars won by 43 points. Was a bit of a competitive outing for Fremantle, but I wouldn't be too concerned if I'm a Fremantle fan. And the All-Stars, interesting to see if we will have this every single year. I don't know if we'll have it every single year, but I think every couple of years would be a really great sign for the Indigenous players in the game, because it was super exciting to see them play. And yeah, hopefully it does come back, because it was a great game of football to watch. Now, we'll first talk about the best on ground, which of course was Jai Simpkin. He won the Polly Farmer medal in the end with 30 touches, 6 marks, 3 tackles, and a goal. It was a great performance, and I would like to see North Melbourne use him in the middle this year, but there are so many options they've got running through there. So hopefully Simpkin does get a go, because he's such a great midfielder, but we'll have to wait and see our North lineup. And on Fremantle's side, I'd probably say Frederick was their best player with the 3 goals, but I do have to mention Jeremy Sharp and Nathan O'Driscoll. Sharp hit the scoreboard with 2 goals as a midfielder and wingman, and O'Driscoll was really prolific with the footy. Now, with news that Hayden Young probably going to pinch hit a little bit more up forward this year, I think O'Driscoll, with his decent left foot kick and a great aerobic capacity, I think there is a chance that he will play this year for the Dockers early on. And hopefully, with a lot of injuries last year, hopefully he gets a good go for the Dockers this year. Now, onto the goal front, the highest goal scorers for each side. Bobby Hill with the 4 goals too, he was brilliant. And Jason Horne-Francis, probably second best on the ground, he had 3 goals. And then on Fremantle's side, like I said, Frederick kicked the 3 goals. Sharp got 2 along with Jai Amos, who does look to have bulked up quite nicely over the summer. Onto the AFL fantasy scores. So unfortunately, this is the only AFL reporting on AFL fantasy statistics. I've had to go to content creators like Stench Footy and a lot of Twitter reporters to try and find statistics for the other games. But for the All-Stars game, the All-Stars had Jai Simpkin top score with the 115 at AFL fantasy front, Jason Horne-Francis with the 99, Bobby Hill with the 78 along with Lawson Humphreys, Stephen May got 77, and Cal Archie, who had to play in the back half, got 71. And for Fremantle, Nathan O'Driscoll top score with the 107, Caleb Sarong with the even 100, Clark with the 94, Brayshaw with the 91, Sharp with the 87, and then Reedy with the 79. Interesting to see if he takes the ruck role this year. Now, unfortunately, there were a couple of injury concerns from this game. Sam Switkowski came off in the first quarter after a head knock and was ruled out soon after. He has had a history of concussion issues, so I expect that Fremantle will take a very cautious approach with him. He may miss round 1 as well, which is really unfortunate. And finally, Johnson for the All-Stars came off in the third term with a right leg issue and took no further part in the game. So we'll just have to see how that plays out there for the Magpies player. But before we go any further, a message from me. If you guys enjoy the content and you want to see more, then make sure to become a member on the channel today. For just $4 a month, you can get early access to video essays, access to live recording to the Boundary Riders podcast, along with exclusive stream perks and much more. And something that I'm super excited to introduce to channel membership this year is the members vote. Every week with the review, you can cast your vote to have your say on the Boundary Riders medal. So for all that and more, click the link down below, and for the added bonus of getting an extra inch onto your member, then do it now. But anyway, let's get back into the content. So next up, we get to the first game on Monday. It was in the morning in WA. It was the West Coast Eagles up against the Tigers. Now, they only played 3 periods, and all the terms, whatever you want to call them, went for 25 minutes flat, no time on. So in the end, the West Coast Eagles won pretty comfortably, 62 to Richmond 26. Now, there was a couple of injuries. I'll start with the injuries in this game because one is pretty significant. First of all, we had Hugo Ralphsmith. He appeared to grab his hamstring in the second term and unfortunately didn't return to the game. And then unfortunately, a really late scare to number 1 draft pick in Sam Lawler, who was assisted off the ground after being pushed into a contest late in the game. Now, this was from Ruben Jinby, I believe. Hopefully, Lawler is all right. I don't think it will push him out of round 1. However, he may miss the Community Series game. But let's get to the game itself. So like I said, it was a pretty shortened game of footy. So things like statistics and AFL Fantasy Supercoach points, I wouldn't take into account too much. We will talk about them a little bit, but I wouldn't think it's too much of a concern. Now, the game had a pretty slow start with neither team kicking a goal for the first 10 minutes. And we only saw 1 goal to either side for the first term. Elijah Hewitt looked pretty good early on for the Eagles, playing as an inside midfielder and kicked the opening goal of the game. And on Richmond's side, Sam Lawler started as an inside mid for the Tigers, kicked the opening goal for them. Mark inside 50 was brilliant and finished with 2 goals for the game. He also had 10 touches, so that is good to see from the number 1 draft pick. I think he'll be used as an inside mid for the Tigers for a lot of the year. Now, Jacob Kaczynski did catch my eye as well as a D50 for the Tigers, looked comfortable in his new position and took a couple of good intercept marks. Now, the Eagles pulled away in the second term with 6 goals to 0, and with the superior lineup, we're just a much better team in the end. Now, a couple of other players to take a look at were Jack Hutchinson. He was recruited in last year's mid-season draft as a forward, but has spent plenty of time on the wing throughout the game. And Seth Campbell for the Tigers was given a lot more midfield minutes. However, with a lot of Tigers players out, I'll be interested to see if Seth Campbell gets that role in the Community Series game. Just a couple of AFL Fantasy points to take a look at. This is from Jordan DeSena over on Twitter, so make sure to go check him out. We saw Sam Banks in the 3-quarter game have 59 points. Just watch out for him, though, because the Tigers, Vlosten, and other defenders didn't really play in this game, a lot of the experienced guys, so just keep your eye out on who else will take over that role. Liam Duggan scored 56 along with Sam Lawler. He got 56 in that 3-quarter game. Jack Graham got the 53. Jack Ross with the 51. Liam Baker with the 35. Elijah Hewitt only got 21 in the end along with Jack Hutchinson. Bo Allen only got the 18. But again, take these with a huge grain of salt because the game was really shortened, and I don't think this is going to be a huge indicator on how both these teams go into round one. And finally, looking at the goals for either side, West Coast had Tyler Brockman top score with 3 goals, and Oscar Allen was the other multiple goal scorer with 2 goals, and for the Tigers, the only multiple goal scorer was Lawler with the 2. So recording just a day later, guys, and unfortunately Sam Lawler's injury, thought to be a concussion, is actually a fractured jaw. Now, Richmond are hopeful that he will be okay for round one, but at this stage, it is about 50-50. So really unfortunate for the number 1 draft pick. So next up, we have the Cats up against Hawthorn, and Geelong in the end were able to hold off Hawthorn, who were fighting all day, and the Cats won 106 to Hawthorn 87. Now, the game itself, the Cats were a lot more dominant early with a lot of scoring shots throughout the first term, and Hawthorn just did their best to stay close. At quarter time, the Cats had 11 scoring shots to 4, and halfway through the second term, the Cats got out to a 4-goal lead. However, Hawthorn did kick the next 4 goals to keep themselves in touch towards half-time. However, the Cats did steady to not let the Hawks break back in front. And into the second half, the Cats threatened to put the Hawks away, but failed to put a real scoreline against the Hawks. And it took until late in the last quarter for the Cats to truly pull away with a 5-3 final term. But to be honest, this is probably the most competitive match simulation we've seen so far. So a good job from the Cats, but Hawthorn wouldn't have too many concerns. Now onto the players in this game. Will Day was pretty much the best player on the ground, has fully recovered from his injury woes that he had last year, and I think he's going to be an All-Australian smoky this year. I think he's going to have a massive season for the Hawks. Bailey Smith, first outing for his club against a opposition side, was pretty busy early on, did slow down as the game went on though, but played as an inside mid and a wingman, so his role looks perfect for him this year. Max Holmes was locked into the midfield, star in the making. I picked him as my All-Australian first-timer this year. I think he's going to be massive for the Cats. On a couple of younger players, Connor O'Sullivan and Mitch Nevitt were the pick of the younger players in this game. O'Sullivan took some really good intercept marks throughout the contest, played a few games last year, so I would be hoping to play more this year. However, the only concern is the fact that Lawson Humphreys wasn't playing. Of course, he played in the Indigenous All-Stars game, so he's probably in front of O'Sullivan at this stage. We just have to wait and see. And on Nevitt, was a part of the inside mids throughout the whole contest, and has been around the periphery of selection for a lot of his career, but maybe this year is the time that he breaks in, especially if they're going to play a person like Dangerfield forward. We just have to wait and see. A couple of positional changes. Finn McGuinness and Blake Hardwick for the Hawks both played up forward for the majority of the game, and James Sicily played up forward in the second half. Blake Hardwick did pinch it up forward last year, but maybe he's going to be a mainstay up there this year. And the big player move that I saw was Sam de Koning. So he played as the number 1 ruck for the Cats for the majority of the game and looks set to be getting the full-time gig in 2025. So interesting to see if he will be taking over from Reece Stanley as the full-time ruck. Now onto the goals. Top goal scorer for the Cats was Ollie Henry with the 4, Brad Close with the 3, Cameron and Shannon Neal both got a couple each. And for Hawthorn, McGuinness, Day and Chol were the multiple goal scorers with 2. On the AFL fantasy front, the top scorers in the end were Will Day with the 101, Tom Stewart with the 85, and Max Holmes for the Cats with the 83. And a couple of injury concerns from this game. I wouldn't be too concerned about them, but there were a couple to keep an eye on. Jack Scrimshaw sat out the second half after copping a poke to the eye in the second quarter, and Josh Battle did end the game on the bench with a corky. So now to the second week of the match simulation, guys. It was the Brisbane Lions, Collingwood and Gold Coast Tri-Series game, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the games went as 25-minute periods, no time on, 2 periods per match. So the first game was Brisbane against Collingwood, second was Gold Coast against Brisbane, and then finally we had the Gold Coast up against Collingwood. Now, it's a bit difficult to talk about statistics in that because a lot of the games were split up. Collingwood played 2 different teams because they had that break in the middle. So it's a little bit difficult to try and gauge what Collingwood are going to be going into. Their pre-season game next week will be a better gauge of how Collingwood are going and how they're going to be going into opening round. Gold Coast and Brisbane probably got a better run at it. I think for the first 3 periods that the Gold Coast and Brisbane played, they played a lot more of a better side. And then in the final period, they started to rotate more VFL graded players at this moment. Now in the first game, we had Brisbane up against Collingwood. Brisbane did win this one. The better players in this game for Brisbane was Lachie Neale, Noah Answorth, Jared Berry, and a young guy named Ty Gallup kicked a couple of goals, while for Collingwood, Nick Dacos was by far the best, along with Josh Dacos. Ed Allen was also good as well. Now, Nick Dacos had 18 touches, 2 marks, 1 goal, 64 fantasy points in basically a half of footy. Josh Dacos did play at halfback, and he's been doing that all pre-season. He looked brilliant in his new role, so I think Collingwood fans should be excited about that. Dan Houston was playing in his usual role at halfback in his match sim, so that's good to see. Harry Perryman was playing in the the midfield. So it does seem he's going to be playing a little bit of a different role that he had at the Giants. I was thinking that he's going to potentially play as a tagger, and maybe he will. I don't think they'd show a tagging role in a match simulation, but he did have some good touches in this game. A good watch for Collingwood fans out there. Ruth McGuinness played in defence, and I thought he performed quite well. Brisbane lined up pretty similar to what they did last year in terms of positional plays, but other than that, Brisbane were too good in the end in this one. Now, Levi Ashcroft didn't play in the first half of the match sim, if you want to call it that. He played in the second game up against the Gold Coast Suns. Gold Coast won this one against Brisbane. Brisbane did play their second team in the last period of this one, and they did rest a few in the first period of the match sim as well. Now, the best players, Bailey Humphrey, Noah Anderson, Matt Rao, Jed Walter were the best for the Gold Coast, in my opinion. Lockie Neal and Levi Ashcroft were the better ones for the Brisbane Lions. And also, Devon Robertson had some good touches as well, but it looks like he's in their second team at this stage. So looking at the Gold Coast, Matt Rao spent a little bit of time forward, not too much. So interesting to see if he will play up there this year. Mac Andrew played in defence and looks like a mainstay back there this year. He was brilliant. And Bailey Humphrey predominantly played midfield for the entire night. Interesting to see if he will be playing as third, fourth midfielder for the Gold Coast this year. Sam Flanders was out as well as Took Miller. So interesting to see if Bailey Humphrey will get a run in there this year, but he was brilliant in the match simulation throughout the whole night. Now, Jed Walter was the player of the match sim that we need to talk about. He seems to be a lot more fitter and is ready for a big season too. Now, he did have a little bit of an injury-hampered first season. Didn't play a lot of games, but it looks like he's bulked up a little bit, but has also got a lot fitter. He looked brilliant up forward. Ethan Reid looked pretty good as well for the Suns, but Jed Walter, I think he's set for a massive year. Now, finally, Levi Ashcroft, like I said, in his first outing, played 2 quarters or a half of a game. He had 17 touches, 1 tackle, 2 marks, 2 rebound inside 50s, 52 fantasy points. And Brisbane fans get excited because I think they're calling them the Bash Brothers, and both of them are performing brilliantly. So keep your eye on Levi. Now, there was one injury concern from this game. It was Leo Lombard. He injured his shoulder. He tried to put a hip and shoulder on Levi Ashcroft and came off second best. Threw his mouthguard away in frustration and has gone off for scans. At this stage, I'm recording this on Friday afternoon. So hopefully it's only a stinger. But considering he threw away his mouthguard in frustration, it doesn't look great for Lombard. And then the final match simulation. It was a little bit of a nothing game, I'm going to be honest. Gold Coast against Collingwood. Collingwood played their other team. The Gold Coast played their better team in the first period and then a VFL sort of team in the second period. Now, the best players in this one, Bailey Humphrey again was brilliant. Ned Moyle and Jake Rogers for the Gold Coast were very good. I like the look of West, Parker, and Jaff for the Pies. So I'm unsure as to a lot of those Collingwood players if they'll get a debut. Maybe Parker, Jaff looked good in his second season. On the Gold Coast side, Jake Rogers did look good. If he is going to play though, he's probably going to have to play forward. He did play a little bit of midfield in this second match simulation, but this was at the point where all the Gold Coast players got taken off the ground, their first team. So if Rogers does play an opening round, he'll probably be a small forward and won't have the same impact as he had in that match simulation. After that though, we move to the Swans up against the Giants. The final scores in this game, the Swans 125, GWS 74, I believe. Now before the game, unfortunately it is confirmed that there's an injury to Cal Mills. According to the Sydney Swans, he's currently managing a mild plantar fascia and will be a test to play the Gold Coast in their pre-season game next week. Bit of a concern for people who are looking at AFL fantasy for Cal Mills. In a high-scoring first term, there was 9 goals kicked between both teams, but Sydney did break away in the second term with both Amadi and Campbell combining for 4 goals each in the first half. Now, the second half was a bit tougher as the rain started to pour down, and Sydney did continue to be the better team throughout the rest of the morning. Now, players to keep an eye on from the game. On the Giants side, Angrove showed some really good signs, kicked 2 goals in the first half, and showed great forward pressure, and is starting to become a bolter for opening round for the Giants. Connor Stone played really well off of halfback, seems to be taking over from players who left in the summer. Phoenix Goffard showed some good signs and is looking for early games for the Giants as well. And James Leake only played the last quarter of the match simulation, but also showed some good signs as well. On Sydney's side, 2 positional changes to look at. Sam Wicks and Tom McCartan both playing in different roles. Wicks was playing as a defender and McCartan was playing as forward. So they both showed pretty good signs. However, I will be interested to see how they line up in the preseason game next week against the Sun. The best player on the ground was Joel Amadi because he did kick 6 in the end, but second best, Errol Goulden, had a good response from his below average grand final. Everyone's talked about it, but finished really well. He had 32 touches, kicked a goal, 6 marks, brilliant from Errol Goulden. Now the goals, like I said, Amadi and Campbell both combined for 4 each in the first half. Amadi finished with 6. Interesting to see how the Swans line up forward this year. McCartan only got the one and didn't really have a lot of impact, so we'll have to see how he goes next week. And Hayden McLean and Robbie Fox both played in the VFL preseason game, so we'll have to see if Hayden McLean's either on the outer of the Swans or if he's just playing in the VFL because of an injury. Just have to wait and see. On the GWS side, though, Aaron Cadman kicked 3, Angrove and Hogan combined for 2 to be the only multiple goal scorers for the Giants. So now we get to the community showdown, Adelaide against Port Adelaide. And in the end, it was the Crows who won after 4 quarters. It was the Crows 103, Port Adelaide 79. Now, a little caveat to this game was the fact that the main game was finished after 4 quarters. The last 2 periods were mainly just Sandful players. And the Crows, in fact, actually changed over their entire team after 3 periods of the game. So they did play a little bit of a lesser team after 3 periods. That's what's the main point that I'm going to be looking at when I show you guys statistics and that on screen. But to the players of this game, Jason Horne-Francis continued his form from his Indigenous All-Stars appearance. His intercept marking was brilliant around the ground and was a part of the midfield core for the entire game. So I think that's where he's going to be throughout the entire year. Joe Richards worked his way into the game, kicked a goal and showed some decent signs. Joe Berry did look good for Port Adelaide, rolling off of half forward, clean with the footy. Round 1 debut seems to be in the cards for him, which is good to see. Miles Bergman seemed to have been playing as a key defender, but this is most likely due to the injuries of Radikalia and Brendan Zerk-Thatcher. Hopefully for Port Adelaide, they don't have to use him as a tool. Port Adelaide are going to struggle, I think, quite a lot. And finally on Port Adelaide, Jeremy Finlayson seemed to have switched back into D50 and played as the second ruck. So he has obviously played second ruck a lot of his Port Adelaide career. So he may have to do that a bit this season with Jordan Sweet being the main guy. Now on the Crows, Sid Draper showed some glimpses, but did struggle to claim a lot of the football. So he may not debut as early as we first thought. James Peatling showed some really good signs amongst a lot of the CBAs for the Crows. Rory Laird returns to half-back role this season, which is interesting. Played there throughout the entire match sim and has trained there all pre-season. Riley Philthorpe kicked 3 goals, so I think he's in for a massive year. Was set for a big year in 2024, then had a big injury, missed pretty much half the season, and then came back and struggled a little, but he looks like he's ready to go in 2025. And then player of the match was Jake Saligo. He was brilliant. Improved last year, but it seems that he's gone to a whole new level. Kicked 3 goals, 81 fantasy points, in for a massive season. It was good news, the fact there was no injuries from this game. There was a bit of a concern from Ryan Burton, but he did return to the field a little bit later. I think he got injured in the second term, so came back and played quite nicely in the end. But to the goals, Riley Philthorpe and Jake Saligo kicked 3, Taylor Walker kicked 2, and for Port Adelaide, DBJ, Darcy Byrne-Jones kicked the 3 goals, only multiple goal scorer for Port Adelaide. So it does seem that Darcy Byrne-Jones will be playing as a small forward this year. Some thought maybe he'd be moving back into the D50, but it does seem that he's going to be a small forward for the Power. So on to the final 2 games, the final 2 match simulations of both weekends. First, we have Melbourne up against North Melbourne. Now, this game was actually pulled forward due to the weather. It was quite warm in Melbourne today. The game ran pretty similar to a normal game, but the one little difference between this game and a regular AFL game was the fact that at the end of both halves, both teams would play a 3-minute match scenario where teams led by 8 points. So at first it was Melbourne up by 8 points, North Melbourne had to catch back, while Melbourne had to hold the lead, and at the end of the second half, we had the other way around. Melbourne did win this game, 107 and North Melbourne 70, and interestingly, North Melbourne played a pretty full strength side while Melbourne had quite a lot of players out. So this is a really good performance from Melbourne. It is a match simulation, so take this with a pinch of salt, but I mean, I'd be happy if I was a Melbourne fan winning this game. So looking at the players, Clayton Oliver looked really good in this match sim. Trained the house down throughout this whole summer, and all indications say he's going to have a massive 2025. He only got 54 fantasy points, but he only played for 3 quarters, and I'm still expecting big things from him this year. Langford for the Demons, top draftee, lined up in the midfield, performed very well throughout the whole game. 59 fantasy points, a chance to debut in round 1. Trent Rivers was the pick of the bunch, in my opinion, for the Demons. He was top scorer on AFL Fantasy Front with 115. Took the most CBAs for Melbourne throughout the game. Lock him in for the midfield this year. I think Petrarca will be pushed forward for this reason, so good signs for Rivers. Now, Harry Sharp, the new recruit from Brisbane, was very good as well. Played off the wing and kicked 4 goals. He trained the house down over the summer, so I'm expecting him for an early debut for the Demons as well. And just on a positional change, Harry Petty has been confirmed now that he's going to be a full-time defender in 2025. On North Melbourne, Harry Sheasel did what you would expect, absolutely starred. If North Melbourne can win some extra games this year, honestly could be a Brownlow Smoky. Caleb Daniel primed for a redemption this year at his new club, kicked a nice goal as well, 90 plus fantasy points in for a massive year. Tom Powell's been one of the more impressive players over the pre-season, had a great first outing with 95 AFL fantasy points. Looks like he's going to be an inside mid this year for the Kangaroos, so that's great signs. Colby McKercher looked good every single time he went near the footy. Going to be an absolute star. However, for fantasy and Supercoach watchers, you may want to steer clear. The reason why I say this is because he doesn't seem to be having a half-back role or a wing role very prominently. It looks like he's going to be playing a little bit more off of half-forward. So just keep your eyes on the preseason game for North Melbourne next week on Colby McKercher. But at this stage, I'm 50-50 on him for fantasy and that. But he's going to be a great player for North Melbourne this year. So North Melbourne fans should be excited. And finally, just on Griffin Lowe, defence for North Melbourne looked more solid than it has been over the last 12 months. With him back there with Comben and Core, hopefully they look a lot better in the D50 in 2025 for North Melbourne. Now onto the goals, the multiple goal scorers. North Melbourne, Nick Larkey kicked 3, Paul Curtis got 2. And on Melbourne's side, Van Rooyen was the best up there with the 4 goals. Harry Sharp got 4 as well. And Pickett and Sparrow both got 2. Now, there was one injury concern from this game. It's really unfortunate. It was Maniz Wakefield. Suffered a serious knee injury, from my understanding, late in this game. Hopefully, it comes back as decent news. It's not as bad as first thought, but really sad news for a guy who had a really good match up to that point when he did the injury. And finally, we have Carlton up against St Kilda. Now, St Kilda won this game 69-58. Carlton did have some players out. Paddy Cripps only played a half. But good signs for St Kilda. Had a lot of injuries over the off-season. From watching this game, it looks like St Kilda have some good signs going into their pre-season game next week. Now, the big talking point from this game is a little-known Irish prospect in O'Connell. No one's really talked about this guy before today, but he kicked 2 goals, played off a wing, was a standout throughout the whole day, and is now suddenly a bolter for a round 1 debut. So, we've obviously seen some Irish prospects in the past, but O'Connell looks like he's bolting into round 1 calculation, so that's a really good sign. Hugo Garcia played a lot of the midfield today. Finished with 80 fantasy points. With the injuries to a few Saints, it looks like he could have a role as an inside mid early in the season. So keep your eye out on Hugo Garcia. Jackson McRae, brilliant. 104 AFL fantasy points. Lock him in for round 1 and beyond. He's in the midfield core. Luke Beveridge, shame on you for not playing him in there more often. Toby Travalia only played the final term. Unsure if he's going to be playing in round 1 now, but did kick a nice goal from outside 50, so maybe just got getting in the eye a little bit of Ross Lyon with that goal. Harry Boyd looked really comfortable playing as the sole ruck for St Kilda today. Unsure if he will play round 1 if Marshall is in, but if Marshall is out, Harry Boyd, lock him in for a round 1 debut. On Carlton's side, Tom de Koning spent extended periods up forward when Mark Pidgenet was in the ruck. If Pidgenet is in round 1, I would avoid de Koning on AFL fantasy fronts and that. I think de Koning is a much better player as a sole ruckman. We'll have to wait and see for Carlton. One of the best forwards from the day was Jesse Motlop, who was almost best player on the ground. Kicked 3 goals. Looks like after the big talks of his pre-season, looks like he's all good to go for the Blues this year. And Ollie Hollands finally looked good off his new role at halfback. Having moved there in the summer, looks like he's going to be a prominent player back there for the Blues this year. So onto the goals, multiple goal kickers. Jesse Motlop with the 3 like I just said, and Mackay got 2. And on St Kilda, O'Connell and Butler were the multiple goal scorers for them. Now, again, there was another injury concern from this game. It was the top draftee for the Blues in Jagger Smith. He hurt his lower leg in the 3rd quarter, and there are some question marks now about if he will play in round 1. Keep your eyes on socials and stuff to see if Jagger Smith, the scans and the reveal of the injury. Hopefully it's all good, but he's question marks now. But guys, that is pretty much all we've got for the review of the match simulations. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And we'll be posting this on Spotify as well. So if you're over there, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow to be notified on the podcast and the review every single week, because the review is back. We'll be doing a review for the pre-season games next week and beyond. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you all next week.